Wales as we head into the late morning period, but it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia in the southeast, even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, hello and welcome to the Briefing PM. It's Monday, the start of your week, and this is your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and this is what's coming up over the next hour on the programme for you. Big story today, of course. MPs are about to debate an emergency motion on sleaze in the Commons in the coming hour. We'll be speaking to Lord Michael Heseltine, the former Deputy Conservative Prime Minister, about how the party ended up in the mess they found themselves in. And also, we'll be going live to a parliamentary debate as soon as this happens. Full coverage here in the next hour. Also, we're in Glasgow for COP26. It's continuing into its second week. But why are the SNP and other Scottish politicians using the conference over a row about independence? We'll bring you an interview with Douglas Ross, the Scottish Tory leader, as he hits back at the SNP. And we'll speak to a university vice-chancellor about the Stock Amendment he's proposing to the Free Speech Bill. Professor James Tooley says it's needed to stop campus harassment of many of the lectures that we see up and down the country. We'll be talking about that, and always we want to hear your views and opinions. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. You know the address by now, or tweet me at GBNews. A very good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. First at 3 o'clock, let's get the news this afternoon. And here's Rosie Wright.
Let's get you up to date at 3 o'clock.
The Labour leader has accused the Prime Minister of running scared, as he will not be attending the emergency debate on parliamentary standards. Last week, the government made a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of the MP Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. The debate will be held in the Commons this afternoon. The Prime Minister, who's visiting a hospital in Northumberland today, says he takes accusations of government corruption seriously.
I've said what I've said about the particular case of one MP who, as I said, suffered over the course of a long investigation, suffered a personal tragedy, has now resigned his seat, and I really don't have any more to add to that. If there's anything positive to come out of the whole thing, it is that, as far as I can make out, the Speaker is determined to try to move us all forward with a system whereby we can have a cross-party approach, which is what we were trying to achieve last week.
UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. British Airways and Virgin Atlantic synchronised their departure from London's Heathrow Airport to the US this morning to mark the occasion. Virgin Atlantic CEO hailed this as a day of celebration.
It's been 600 days that the US border has been shut down for UK nationals. Who would have believed that could be a possibility at all? So to see the passengers coming in early in the morning, grandparents going to see grandchildren they've never met, families reuniting, people going to care for elderly people, and businesses reconnecting is really a day of celebration for all of us in the industry and, of course, for Virgin Atlantic.
Former US President Barack Obama says larger nations should shoulder more of the burden of fixing the climate crisis. Speaking at the COP26 summit, he said if we don't act, then it's going to be too late for island nations.
But there is one thing that should transcend our day-to-day politics and normal geopolitics, and that is climate change. It's not just that we can't afford to go backward, we can't afford to stay where we are. The world has to step up, and it has to step up now.
A teenager has been jailed for 16 years for murdering his 12-year-old friend after luring him into a woodland in Lancashire. The trial heard that the 15-year-old, who now can be named as Marcel Gressech, stabbed Robert Spunsis in excess of 70 times, and that there was a neck wound consistent with a decapitation attempt. Justice Jeremy Baker told Lincoln Crown Court that there was a significant degree of planning and premeditation. Roberts was killed on the 12th of December last year, 2 days before his 13th birthday. Poland has accused the Belarusian government of pushing migrants towards its border in a bid to stoke a major confrontation. It says some migrants have started to push through the border fence in Poland. The Polish government has sent more than 12,000 troops to the border. The European Union claims Belarusian authorities have been encouraging migrants to cross into EU countries via Belarus in revenge for Western sanctions on Minsk over human rights abuses. Police in the French city of Cannes have shot a man who attacked a group of officers with a knife. One policeman was stabbed but escaped injury, protected by his bulletproof vest. The suspect allegedly tried to attack a second officer when a third policeman opened fire. Sources said the attacker claimed to have been acting in the name of the Prophet. A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police recovered a pair of goggles. His wife said he died doing what he loved. A dress worn by Amy Winehouse has sold for more than £180,000 at auction. That's 16 times the original estimate. The halter neck was worn by the singer during her final stage performance a month before her death at the age of 27. More than £3 million was raised from the sale of over 800 items, including clothing, handwritten notes and accessories. You're up to date. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. Now let's focus on our top story this afternoon, and that is that MPs are due to begin an emergency debate in the Commons in the coming hour after the fallout from the Owen Paterson fiasco, which has raised serious questions about MPs taking up second jobs, and it's claimed selling their influence to companies. Also involved, the House of Lords. Well, it's come under fire as well, with the Sunday Times revealing yesterday of the last 16 Conservative Party treasurers, all but one had been offered a seat in the upper chamber. And there are even calls to call in the police, with Scotland Yard being urged to launch a cash for honours investigation amid claims that a £3 million donation to the Conservative Party guarantees a peerage. Big questions are being asked this afternoon about the future of the House of Lords, about whether there need to be more regulations when it comes to MPs, particularly when lobbying is already banned, but should second jobs follow suit? Well, one person who's not going to be in the House of Commons this afternoon is the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He instead was on a visit to a hospital this morning and faced questions about the Commons debate this afternoon. Let's have a watch.
So what we've got to make sure is that we take all this very, very seriously, and that we get it right. And there's a debate today. Unfortunately, I can't be there because I've had a long-standing engagement up here. But Labour want to focus, the opposition obviously want to focus on a particular case, a particular MP who suffered a serious personal tragedy and who's now resigned. And what we want to do, and I frankly, I don't think there's much more to be said about that particular case. I really don't. But what we do need to do is look also at the process. And that is what we were trying to do last week. The Speaker is saying he wants to have a cross-party approach to look at the issue of appeals in particularly difficult cases. And I totally support that.
To be clear, Prime Minister, you're not going to apologise for the one you acted.
Look, I think it's very important that we get this right, and we are going to make every effort to get it right, and we are going to hold MPs to account. What I think is also, and MPs, as I said last week, should not break the rules. And I've said what I've said about the particular case of one MP who, as I said, suffered over the course of a long investigation, suffered a personal tragedy, has now resigned his seat, and I really don't have any more to add.
There we go. That was the Prime Minister speaking a little bit earlier, not exactly necessarily answering the questions directly. Well, delighted to say I'm now joined to at least try and get to the bottom of some of the big questions being posed today in Parliament by Dr. Craig Prescott. He is a UK constitutional and law and politics expert and a lecturer in law at Bangor University. Good afternoon to you, Professor Prescott. First of all, just explain to me, if you can, because it is pretty complicated, even for us Westminster observers, what are the rules at the moment when it comes to second jobs for MPs and this idea about using potentially those second jobs to lobby on behalf of those companies?
Good afternoon. It's good to join you. In principle, MPs can have a second job, but they must declare that they have a second job and declare how much they earn from that second job. But what they cannot do is use that second job, that outside interest they have, and combine it with their position as an MP, and then engage in lobbying on behalf of whoever they have that second job with. So there's a fine line here between being a consultant, perhaps using your political knowledge and perhaps learning from about another sector as a consultant for someone outside Parliament, but then sort of ending up as a paid lobbyist. And it's about finding where that line should be and ensuring that MPs stay on the right side of that line at all times. But the rules are very clear that if you do engage in paid lobbying, that's a breach of the Code of Conduct, and the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards will investigate that whenever any allegations arise.
And in saying that, that's obviously many people feel, well, not many people, clearly the Commons Standards Commissioner and indeed the committee felt that Owen Paterson crossed that fine line, as you put it. So there is this debate this afternoon where lots of parliamentarians are calling essentially for MPs to lose that chance of having a second job. And you have to remember, many MPs earn hundreds of thousands of pounds a year on top of their MP salary, don't they, from doing particularly consulting work. Is there an argument, would you say, Craig, for MPs being allowed to have a second job? What is the argument that those MPs put forward to say, you know what, yes, being an MP is busy, but also I'm entitled to pursue another career at the same time?
Well, there's several things. I think one difficulty is what do we mean by a second job? Because there are some MPs who are hospital doctors who work at a hospital for some of their time. Others, if you're a lawyer, you do need to engage in the legal profession still to, say, retain your practicing certificate as a solicitor or as a barrister. So some may need to still engage with their profession in order to remain a part of that profession. And generally, we would quite like our MPs to have a broad range of experience. And if we get to a position where we say, well, as soon as you become an MP, that's it, you can't do anything else, that may make becoming an MP very unattractive to the sorts of people we would quite like in the House. So again, it's about framing the rules and finding the right balance here. And maybe we just haven't quite got that right at the moment.
Now, of course, it is different in the House of Lords, isn't it? Because peers don't get an annual salary; they get an allowance every day for when they turn up. But we then saw this story, a different story, it must be said, though, in the Sunday Times yesterday about cash for honours around Conservative peers. And instead of focusing on that particularly, yet here we are again, aren't we, with questions over the House of Lords, who's in it. What do you have to do to be able to get into it? It is a chamber that almost all political parties say that they're up for reforming, but reform never seems to happen.
Yes, it has been described as the Bermuda Triangle of British politics, in that all political parties over the years have proposed reforms, but they never really see the light of day. Indeed, we could go as far back as 1911, where some reforms were made to the powers of the House of Lords, and these were only meant to be a temporary measure pending the introduction of an elected second chamber. And over 100 years on, that still hasn't happened. Clearly, the issue here is that we've moved towards a predominantly appointed House of Lords, and we've relied effectively on the good sense of the leaders of our political parties to nominate the right sorts to become members of the House of Lords. And maybe that process is breaking down, and maybe we need to look at removing the powers of patronage from party leaders. It's not just the Prime Minister of the day, it's sort of the leader of the Labour Party, Liberal Democrat parties and so on. They also put names forward. Or maybe we look more broadly about reforming the House of Lords, perhaps on a regional basis, increasing regional representation in the House of Lords. And that might marry along with the government's levelling up agenda. Perhaps increasing the voice of the North and maybe Scotland and Wales in terms of ensuring there's representation of the Union into a second chamber. One criticism at the moment is that it's quite London-centric, given its nature. And so there might be an opportunity there for a government with some imagination to do something with the House of Lords and taking this as an opportunity.
Indeed, and I'm old enough to remember when there were suggestions it might even move to York or somewhere outside of London. Fascinating discussion. Thank you, Craig Prescott, for shining lots of light there on what is a particularly complicated subject. Really appreciate your time here on GB News. That's Professor Craig Prescott there. And as I say, we are expecting that debate to start within the next hour or so. It's going to be a really important one. We'll, of course, bring you live coverage here on GB News. Do not miss that. But before we do, let's focus on COP26, because we're now into the second week of the climate change conference in Glasgow. Now, today's big thing kind of focuses on apparently delivering the practical solutions needed to adapt to climate impacts and address loss and damage. However, a Scottish independence row has overshadowed events with the SNP, some would claim, using the conference to launch a pro-independence ad campaign last week. Well, we're going to be speaking to the Scottish Tories because they have hit back at this suggestion. But today, also at that conference, we've had a pretty big name in time. Barack Obama, of course, the former US president, has been addressing delegates in Glasgow. Delighted to say I'm joined by Tom Holwood, our political correspondent, who is at COP26. Good afternoon to you, Tom. First of all, what did Barack Obama have to say? I think he slightly laid into his predecessor, or his successor, I should say, sorry, Donald Trump.
He certainly did. There was warmth towards him in the room where he sort of criticised Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. I mean, that's clearly playing to the crowd. We're at a UN conference here. We're at a conference that 4 or 5 conferences ago agreed that Paris Agreement. So very clearly easy to play to the crowd there with saying that the US should never have withdrawn from that agreement. Although I have to say, a little bit of a fact check here. Despite the US withdrawing from Paris, it actually met its Paris targets anyway, mainly because under Barack Obama there was a lot of shale gas exploration and fracking within the United States, and that of course is a lower carbon source of energy than coal, for example, and so the US through that mechanism actually managed to reduce its CO2 by a larger degree than countries like Canada. Now that's something that isn't often discussed, but no, today Barack Obama, of course, he laid into his successor, but also he did say that China and Russia should have been represented at the top level as well. So there was criticism not just for the Western world, but for the autocratic governments as well. Although the main message of Barack Obama's speech is that future generations, the young people of today, feel differently about climate change than older generations, and that young people's fears should be paid heed to. And that was really a big message from his quite lengthy, quite substantial speech that he gave just moments ago.
But there is one thing that should transcend our day-to-day politics and normal geopolitics, and that is climate change. It's not just that we can't afford to go backward, we can't afford to stay where we are. The world has to step up, and it has to step up now.
Barack Obama speaking there in Glasgow this afternoon. And Tom, we saw quite a lot of people, 100,000 or so, on the streets of Glasgow over the weekend. You joined them, didn't you? What was the sense of what got people in the rain in Glasgow to turn out and protest? What was the sense of what they wanted to achieve?
I have to say they advertised it as 100,000 people being on the ground and looking at those gatherings, looking at those marches. It came nowhere close. A smattering of a few thousand, perhaps. Big stages set up, although crowds thinning very, very quickly, mainly perhaps to do with the rain. People prefer a nice warm roof over their heads than actually getting out and protesting a climate conference. That's the very odd thing. I was speaking to so many of these people who are out and about with various signs, some of which were contradictory. I saw a big sign being held aloft that had the words COP26, and the O had a big cross through it and was replaced by an R and an A, spelling out a rude word. These are people that really did not like a lot that was going on in COP. Some are actually opposed to net zero, not for the reason that many people might be opposed to net zero in terms of the cost, but because they say net zero doesn't go far enough. No, some of these people on these marches were saying that net zero is a cop-out because it doesn't get to 0-0. It means offsetting various carbon emissions by planting trees. They were actually opposed to that. It was quite extraordinary when I spoke to some of those people yesterday. A real mix of quite out there views, and also on these marches, people who weren't really thinking about the climate as forefront in their agenda at all. We saw lots of flags for various other causes around the world. I saw Palestinian flags, I saw a flag of the USSR, I saw flags of Cuba, quite a lot, and banners from various socialist parties, one that said only a world socialist revolution can solve the climate crisis. I'm not sure how much truth there is in that, and I'm not sure how much understanding there is in terms of what's being achieved within the walls of this COP. The various agreements on reducing methane emissions, on reforestation, on eliminating coal that many countries have signed up to, even many surprising countries on trees, for example. Brazil and China even signing up to reforestation commitments, growing back forests by the end of this decade. It's curious to see so much hostility to what is, to all intents and purposes, an incredibly progressive agenda going on here. It's interesting to see outside people raising an eyebrow at that.
OK, Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom Hobwood there joining us from Glasgow, and Tom will be back with his programme tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Live from COP26. We're going to pause there on GB News, the briefing PM. Up next, we're going to be returning, though, to Scotland, speak to the Scottish Tories about how COP has gone, about the role of the SNP, whether they've been using that conference for independence lobbying. We'll be in Glasgow with that interview with Douglas Ross in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's get you the weather on this Monday afternoon from the Met Office down in Exeter.
Hello again. It's a grey afternoon out there for many of us, but rain is mostly affecting northern areas, Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, and it's a little milder for most compared to the last couple of days. That's because we've got this slice of mild and moist Atlantic air in between a warm front and a cold front that's spreading southeastwards across the country. Ahead of it, still some sunshine for parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Doesn't last long. After dark, the cloud sweeps in, and for much of the country, it's a cloudy night. That cloud lowering to give some mist and fog in places. And the wet weather in the northwest will also sink south by the end of the night. Northern Ireland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England, fairly damp. But clearer skies there for northern Scotland, and a slight chill in the air first thing under those clear skies. 3 or 4 Celsius in some sheltered spots. Nevertheless, it's a milder start elsewhere with a lot of cloud cover, some mistiness first thing, and the persistent rain continuing for northern England and increasingly parts of Wales, mostly over the higher ground, drier elsewhere. And after that gloomy start in the southeast, it brightens up, 16 Celsius here. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, well, despite brighter skies, we will also see a fresher breeze and some blustery showers into the northwest of Scotland and Northern Ireland, perhaps sinking south during Tuesday night to affect more eastern and southern areas for a time. Further south again, and we keep this area of cloud through central zones. Wales, Midlands, southwest England seeing some bursts of rain through the night, on and off really. And all that cloud cover keeps temperatures up in the double figures. Further north, though, for northern England, for Scotland and for Northern Ireland, some bright spells on Wednesday morning, but further showers mainly towards the northwest. Whilst in the south, a gloomy and in places damp start to Wednesday, with that continuing into the afternoon. Thursday looks mostly dry across the UK with some sunshine towards the northeast. Friday, more unsettled weather in the north.
Hi, I'm Alistair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years and I've made lots of friends, and I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alistair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3, every Saturday and Sunday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the briefing here on GB News, coming up to 3:30. Let's return to Scotland and COP, because we've been speaking to Douglas Ross. He is the Scotland Conservative leader, about how that conference is going in Glasgow and also the role of the SNP. Tom Holwood had a little bit of a chat with him earlier, and here's what he had to say.
Delighted to be here. This is the biggest conference ever held in the United Kingdom. It's here in Scotland, here in Glasgow, and you can see around you, hundreds of nations coming together to look for solutions to the climate emergency.
It's certainly true that the UK has done a lot more than many other countries when it comes to reducing CO2 emissions, more than any other country in the G20 in the last 30 years. However, there are some black marks that the media is dragging up against this government. I'm talking about a coal field in Cumbria and a potential oil field in Cambo. Where do the Scottish Conservatives stand on them both?
Well, looking at Cambo, that's a huge issue here in Scotland, and just look at the hundreds of thousands of people employed in Scotland and across the UK in the oil and gas industry. Now, we all want to see a just transition from oil and gas, but at the moment, while there is still demand, then it's better to source that in and around the waters around the United Kingdom rather than importing it, because that is going to have a greater carbon footprint. So that's why we support the ongoing exploration in the Cambo oil field, and it's, I think, a bit disingenuous of people like Nicola Sturgeon and others to say we should review this. You either support the oil and gas industry at the moment or you don't, and it seems here in Scotland that Nicola Sturgeon is now siding with her Green colleagues in government rather than the tens and hundreds of thousands of jobs here in Scotland that rely on oil and gas.
Nicola Sturgeon calling for a review, not wanting to object it outright, sort of standing in both camps there. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, however, saying it's not his decision, saying it's an independent regulatory decision. That's a bit of a cop-out, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not, and obviously this decision goes back some time as well. I think Nicola Sturgeon calling for a review, we all remember Nicola Sturgeon telling us just a few years ago that it was Scotland's oil, and if we became an independent nation in 2014, we would pay for all of our services from the revenues from oil and gas. But now she seems to be turning her back in the industry, and I think that's very dangerous for Scotland.
Does that really undermine the case for Scottish independence, though? The case as it existed, so reliant on those oil revenues, and now potentially none of those revenues coming down the track at all.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the white paper that the SNP brought forward in 2014 suggested oil would be over $100 a barrel, and that was going to, as I say, pay for all our public services. That's clearly not the case anymore, and once again, the facts behind independence and separating Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom don't bear scrutiny. There are no answers to the questions to to Nicola Sturgeon and others who support independence about how we would pay for our services if we were to ever separate from the rest of the United Kingdom.
Now, we're hearing some news this week about new nuclear power stations, potentially small modular reactors, cheap reactors that could power millions of homes. The Scottish Government has banned new nuclear in Scotland. Is that a mistake?
Well, we've always said we have to have a mix of energy sources, and that's the right approach to take. And taking a very particular view on nuclear, I think, is shutting the door to potential forms of energy that may be crucial as we look to decarbonise and see less energy coming from coal, for example.
So you'd like to see the Scottish Government repeal its ban on new nuclear in this part of the country?
We've got to look at everything. We are facing a climate emergency, and if you shut the door on one form of energy, then you are going to cause problems. And I think we have to have an open mind to these things, and that's why we've always said there should be a mix in our energy sources here in Scotland and across the UK.
Now, we're here at the heart of COP, but it's not just COP that's going on in the country. There are lots of other issues that are affecting the whole of the United Kingdom. But particularly for Scotland, drug deaths is something that has really been a black mark against this administration. And you have a bill that you're presenting to Parliament this week, I believe, in terms of trying to deal with that. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so it's a right to recovery bill. So we put this forward in the election back in May of this year. We hoped the Scottish Government would come on board. They're still, again, sitting on the fence saying they want more details. So if they're not going to bring forward these plans, then I will. As leader of the Scottish Conservatives, I've launched a consultation into my own private member's bill to enshrine in law a right to recovery, because we've seen, as you said, record deaths here in Scotland as a result of drug misuse. We know Nicola Sturgeon has said herself she took her eye off the ball, but when she's had her eye off the ball, then lives have been lost and families have been torn apart because of this crisis, and something has to happen. The SNP took money out of recovery services. We want to see investment in there and enshrine in law, so everyone who wants support, wants help, can get it.
There is something that the Scottish Government is trying to do with regard to, as the Scottish Conservatives have been saying, go some way to decriminalise, to treat more drugs as a health issue rather than a criminal issue. Doesn't that sound like a good idea?
Well, I agree it's a public health issue, but that doesn't mean you have to decriminalise potentially very dangerous drugs to deal with it as a public health issue. And I'm very concerned what it means about...
There you go. That was Douglas Ross speaking to us a little bit earlier about what's happening there in Glasgow. We're going to dip out of that, as you've seen, because we're going to go live to the House of Commons. I'm going to hear from the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid.
In December last year, David Fuller was charged with the murder of two young women, Wendy Nell and Caroline Pearce, in the Tunbridge Wells area of Kent in 1987. Last week, he pleaded guilty to their murders. My thoughts, and I am sure the thoughts of the whole House, are with Wendy and Caroline's family and friends. As well as this, the Kent and Essex Serious Crime Directorate has been carrying out an investigation into his offences in hospital settings between 2008 and 2020. As a result, Fuller was charged with a series of shocking offences involving sexual offences committed in a hospital mortuary. He has also pleaded guilty to these offences. As sentencing has yet to take place, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the particular case. But I will say this, that in light of what has happened, the Justice Secretary will be looking at whether the penalties that are currently available for such appalling sexual offences are appropriate. Mr. Speaker, it has taken months of painstaking work to uncover the extent of this man's offending. And the fact that these offences took place in a hospital, a place where all of us should feel safe and free from harm, makes this all the more harrowing. This has been an immensely distressing investigation, and I would like to thank the police for the diligent and sensitive way that they have approached it. They have shown the utmost professionalism in the most upsetting of circumstances, and I would like to thank them for their ongoing work. I'd also like to thank the local NHS Trust, Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells, for cooperating so closely with the police. Mr. Speaker, officers have tragically found evidence of 100 victims. Of these victims, 81 have been formally identified, and specially trained family liaison officers have been supporting their families. Every family of a known victim has been contacted. We've been working closely with the police and crime commissioner and the NHS Trust to make sure that those families who've been directly affected receive the 24/7 support that they need, including access to dedicated caseworkers and mental health support and counselling. If anyone else is concerned that they or their loved ones may be a victim, or if they have any further information, they should search online for the Major Incident Police Portal and select Kent Police and Operation Sandpiper. I know how distressing the details of these offences will be for many people. The local NHS Trust has put arrangements in place to support staff who've been affected, and regardless of whether someone has been directly impacted by these offences or not, they can access the resources that are available on the My Support Space website. Mr. Speaker, this is a profoundly upsetting case that has involved distressing offences within the health service. The victims are not just those family members and friends who have been abused in this most horrific of ways. They are also those that are left behind. People who have already experienced such loss and now experience unimaginable pain and anger. They are victims too. Even as we look into exactly what happened, as the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, I want to apologise to the friends and families of all the victims for the crimes that were perpetrated in the care of the NHS and for the hurt and suffering they are feeling. Mr. Speaker, I know that no apology can undo the pain and suffering caused by these offences. But with such serious issues of dignity and security, we have a duty to look at what happened in detail and make sure it never happens again. So I would like to update the House on the steps that we are taking. First, NHS England has written to all NHS trusts asking for mortuary access and post-mortem activities to be reviewed against current guidance from the Human Tissue Authority. Trusts have also been asked to review their ways of working and to take a number of extra steps, including making sure that they have effective CCTV coverage in place, that entry and access points are controlled with swipe access, and that appropriate DBS checks and risk assessments are being carried out. NHS England will report directly to me with assurances that these measures have been taken, so that we can be confident that the highest standards are being followed and that we are maintaining security and upholding the dignity of the deceased. Next, the local trust has been putting its own steps in place. They've already conducted their peer review of mortuary practice, and the trust initiated an independent investigation into these specific offences. I would like to thank the Trust for its leadership and for their quick initial work to set up that investigation. But, Mr. Speaker, given the scale and the nature of these sexual offences, I believe that we must go further. And so today I can announce that I am replacing the Trust investigation with an independent inquiry. The inquiry will look into the circumstances surrounding the offences committed at the hospital and their national implications. It will help us understand how these offences took place without detection in the Trust, identify any areas where early action by this Trust was necessary, and then consider wider national issues, including for the NHS. I have appointed Sir Jonathan Michael to chair this inquiry. Sir Jonathan is an experienced NHS Chief Executive. He is a Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and a former Chief Executive of 3 NHS hospital trusts. He had been leading the Trust investigation and will be able to build on some of the work that he has already done. The inquiry will be independent and it will report to me as Secretary of State. I've asked Sir Jonathan to split his inquiry into two parts. The first, an interim report, which I've asked for early in the new year. The second, a final report, looking at the broader national picture and the wider lessons for the NHS and for other settings. We will publish the terms of reference in due course, and I have also asked Sir Jonathan to discuss with families and others to input into that process. Sir Jonathan's findings...
There we go, that was Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, talking about the David Fuller case. Of course, he was found to have filmed himself abusing bodies in two Kent hospital morgues. Also was found guilty of sexually assaulting and murdering two women in Tunbridge Wells in 1987. Sajid Javid there say he's going to launch an inquiry into what happened. Clearly concerns, aren't there, about access to hospital morgues following that case. So Sajid Javid there speaking there about how there will be an independent inquiry in the House of Commons. OK, we're going to pause here on the briefing on GB News. After the break, we're going to be speaking to Lord Michael Heseltine about what the big story today is, the so-called corruption sleaze, as Labour are branding it, at the heart of the Conservative government. Reforms for MPs, they're lobbying their second jobs. We'll be speaking to that former Deputy Conservative Prime Minister in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing. Now we're going to focus on an amendment that's been called for to the government's free speech bill. That's in light of the attacks on Professor Catherine Stock from Sussex University. Stock, who was forced to resign from her jobs due to a campaign of protests and targeted harassment on campus by transgender activists. That's Catherine Stock on screen there. And the Higher Education Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment, is supposed to protect those with views on minority rights, but also those who believe biological sex is real, like Catherine Stock. But the bill, as I say, which is currently going through Parliament, has been going for quite a long time, and there are calls for changes to it. And my next guest is Professor James Tooley. He is the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Buckingham and is calling, aren't you, James, for a so-called Stock amendment to be made to this bill. Just explain what that actually means.
Yes, so you've rightly summarised. Professor Kathleen Stock was, in a sense, hounded from her job, but she wasn't. She was hounded from her job by a campaign, a concerted, orchestrated campaign by students perhaps some other staff members and outsiders. And the problem with the current bill going through the Houses of Parliament is that it wouldn't really do anything about that. It would almost allow that still to happen. So what I'm proposing is, yes, we call it a Stock amendment now, where someone in Professor Stock's position, she would be able to sue her university or go to the Office for Students and make a complaint if she's being hounded through a campaign of harassment like that. So at the moment, if she was refused a job or not allowed to publish, she could go through the process of complaint. I want to make it stronger so someone is really harassed can actually make a complaint in the same way.
And when we look back, and we've heard from Professor Stock since, as you say, she's left that university, and she's talked about how it was the end point, I think, of 3.5 years of low-level bullying, harassment and reputation thrashing, not just from students, but from colleagues too. I'm sure you know Catherine pretty well. Just explain to viewers what she has been through in the last 3.5 years.
Yeah, well, and she's, you said described it as low level, but it was actually quite high level in the end, wasn't it? There were posters put around campus. There were thugs in hoodies, black hoodies, going around calling for her resignation. There were horrible things posted through her door and so on. And so much so in the end, I mean, the last time I was supposed to meet Kathleen Stock, we were supposed to speak on a panel together in London. The police advised her not to travel from her home near the Sussex University. They advised her not to travel. Such was the degree of harassment she was experiencing. So it was a horrible campaign. And as I say, I don't want any, as Vice Chancellor of my own university and seeing other Vice Chancellors around, we don't want that to happen again. I don't want that to happen again. And I just want this bill to be slightly strengthened so that if anyone is in that position, they will be able to sue their university or make a complaint before 3.5 years of harassment takes place. That's the key thing. We want to be able to nip this in the bud early on.
Now, no one's going to say, obviously, and rightly so, that harassment is the way to deal with this. What would you say to people who are concerned, though, that actually this bill and the talk around it in many regards is in itself a limit to free speech? Because, at universities, of course, lecturers and staff have got views which they should be freely able to express, but students should also be freely able to disagree with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've hit on precisely, this is a very fine line that has to be, maneuvered, if you like. You've got to protect free speech of everyone. But the key thing is that absolutely, in the case of Professor Stock, it was not speech. The people were not engaging in speech. They were not engaging in debate. They were not looking at her, going through her excellent book and saying, well, we disagree with that, we disagree with that. They were just calling for her resignation. They were harassing her. And that is unacceptable. That's not speech, that's harassment. And that can be got rid of, that can be curtailed without impacting free speech. But you have to be very careful. You're absolutely right. You have to respect the free speech of students, free speech of everyone. There is a way of doing that whilst not allowing the sort of awful situation that Kathleen Stock was put under.
OK, really appreciate your thoughts on that. And as you say, that campaign to bring that amendment carries on. James Tooley there joining us to talk about that free speech bill. OK, let's return now to our top story. We know in the next couple of minutes there's going to be this big debate, isn't there, in the Commons about potential changes to rules when it comes to MPs, to the procedures that they may well face, and wider discussions about second jobs and so-called Tory sleaze. Delighted to say I'm joined by the former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Heseltine. Good afternoon to you, Lord Heseltine. I suppose, first of all, we heard from Joe Major at the weekend saying this was shameful and unconservative, what the Prime Minister and the government did last week. What's your view on it?
Well, as I've said several times, I totally agree with John Major. Probably doesn't surprise you to hear that. But it is a very serious issue, and at its heart is people's trust in our parliamentary democracy. and it is absolutely essential if we are going to survive as a democracy that people should actually believe in the workings of Parliament and in the integrity of the members of Parliament.
How much did last week damage that?
I think in the short term, a great deal of damage. It's quite obvious from the polls which we've seen that people took very strong views of a hostile nature, and that's quite understandable. But if you talk about the long-term damage, the truth is that politicians have never enjoyed public esteem. We've always been at the wrong end of public opinion. You know the remarks, they're only in it what they can get out of it. They never come here. We never hear from them. This is a common expression of doubt. I think it's a great shame, and I don't think it reflects reality. But I've been in politics a long enough time myself to know that that's what a lot of people think.
You've been in politics a long time. Do you think it's time that MPs stopped having second jobs then? Do you think if something comes from that, that would be a good move?
I think that would be a disastrous move. I think that it's absolutely right that members of the government can't have second jobs. And I think it's absolutely right that members of Parliament should declare any income they have in addition to their parliamentary salary. But if you actually want to reduce the quality of people going into Parliament, all you've got to do is to say that people cannot have an outside income. In my view, the breadth of people who are in Parliament is enhanced by the ability to serve your people in your constituency in Parliament, but at the same time, if you want to drive yourself into the sort of work levels that most MPs do embrace, then you should be able to have a second income from other outside sources.
Now, you're, of course, Deputy Prime Minister back under John Major's government. People pointing to this government, Boris Johnson's government, they're talking about wallpaper gates, that expensive wallpaper. They're talking about public service contracts that were handed out without tendering. They're now talking, Lord Heseltine, about Owen Paterson and potential sleaze here. Do you think we're back to the mid-1990s in terms of the damage to the Conservative Party?
Well, there's a short-term damage, without any doubt. But I think it's a much broader historical phenomenon than you're suggesting. There has always been the risk of a tiny number of people in public life who abuse the trust which they should value. And you don't have to look at the 1990s as a particular example, because there have been these examples under all governments, frankly, throughout history. And in the way of things, the chances are that that will happen. But what one must do is condemn it and to put in place machinery to make it as difficult as possible for these abuses to take place.
Just very quickly, Lord Heseltine, before we let you go, what do you think about the Prime Minister's role in this, though? Is he as concerned about public standards or standards in public life as some of his predecessors? That's what his critics would argue, that he is not as concerned as he should be about standards in public life.
Well, there are two ways of looking at this issue, and it was very clearly expressed in an article in the Times by Matthew Paris last Saturday. The first explanation for the Prime Minister's behaviour was loyalty to his friends. Well, in truth, he shouldn't have put loyalty to his friends above parliamentary responsibilities. But you can understand that. On the other side, he is concerned that there is to be an ongoing look at some of his own personal involvements with the Downing Street flat, for example, and a holiday overseas. And that in order to preclude that, he wanted to set aside the present arrangements. That is wholly unacceptable, and that is where the charge of political corruption arises. But the only person who can answer the question as to which of those, or anything in between, is actually the truth is the Prime Minister himself.
OK, Lord Heseltine, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Lord Heseltine, there, the, of course, former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister. OK, we're going to be bringing you that debate live, due to start in the House of Commons very shortly. Of course, that will be in the Alex show, the afternoon agenda. Alex Phillips up next with that. We're back again tomorrow at 3. Thanks for watching. Let's go to the Met Office and get the weather this Monday afternoon.
Hello again. It's a grey afternoon out there for many of us, but rain is mostly affecting northern areas, Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of northwest England, and it's a little milder for most compared to the last couple of days. That's because we've got this slice of mild and moist Atlantic air in between a warm front and a cold front that's spreading southeastwards across the country. Ahead of it, still some sunshine for parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Doesn't last long. After dark, the cloud sweeps in. And for much of the country, it's a cloudy night. That cloud lowering to give some mist and fog in places. And the wet weather in the northwest will also sink south by the end of the night. Northern Ireland, parts of southern Scotland, northern England, fairly damp. But clearer skies there for northern Scotland and a slight chill in the air first thing under those clear skies. 3 or 4 Celsius in some sheltered spots. Nevertheless, it's a milder start elsewhere with a lot of cloud cover, some mistiness first thing, and the persistent rain continuing for northern England and increasingly parts of Wales, mostly over the higher ground, drier elsewhere. And after that gloomy start in the southeast, it brightens up, 16 Celsius here. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, well, despite brighter skies, we will also see a fresher breeze and some blustery showers into the northwest of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps sinking south during Tuesday night to affect more eastern and southern areas for a time. Further south again, and we keep this area of cloud through central zones, Wales, Midlands, southwest England, seeing some bursts of rain through the night, on and off really. And all that cloud cover keeps temperatures up in the double figures. Further north, though, for northern England, for Scotland and for Northern Ireland, some bright spells on Wednesday morning, but further showers mainly towards the northwest. Whilst in the south, a gloomy and, in places, damp start to Wednesday, with that continuing into the afternoon. Thursday looks mostly dry across the UK, with some sunshine towards the northeast. Friday, more unsettled weather in the north.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.